agar is in between bacteriological and edible grade agar, and one can seed around 2 to 3 kg and obtain 30 to 50 kg from single raft. The average growth rate is about 5%. One can take 6 cycles of growth per year, and as I said, it is in between pharmaceutical grade agar, yields around 20 to 35% yield, and gel strength is around 300 to 1000 grams per centimeter square. It also yields sap. Not every agarophyte can give you sap. Like Gilidiella, although the agar is of bacteriological grade, you cannot get sap from it. From Gracilaria dura, although you have some water content, but the gel strength is so high that when you expel sap, that small heat itself promotes the alga to form gel, and you cannot get sap. But this algae, like Gracilaria edulis, it gives around 30 to 35% sap. And we have also studied in very systematic manner its harvest potential, biomass yield, growth in 2 years experiment, and it has shown that this has a commercial potential. Now, as I said, there are 4 candidates now. Let us see how they perform, because each alga has a different kind of growth cycle. Initial seed is different. What we did is we have considered 2 different yield scenarios. One is low and one is high. And we have set 2 different targets to produce 1 ton fresh biomass per day and 5 tons fresh biomass per day. What are the requirements? When you see in terms of productivity in terms of rafts, we found that Gracilaria debilis was more productive. That means it requires more number of rafts to achieve 1 ton or 5 ton of production per day, and followed by Idilis, then Dura, and last one is Gildiella acirosa. So in terms of raft, we can see that Gracilaria debilis is more profitable. When you see in terms of length of rope used, because you have to tie seedlings to the rope, and in case of 2 by 2 meter rafts, around 400 meters of rope is used for single raft. When we did analysis, as expected, again Gracilaria debilis was found to be best because it requires less number of rafts. But when you see in terms of area, again you can see that debilis is best for occupying less water space. But when you see in terms of manpower, here also we found that debilis is best, followed by idilis, Gillidiella acirosa, and dura. If you remember in last 3 slides, Gillidiella acirosa was last, but here Gracilaria dura came last. This is because Gillidiella acirosa has 90 days growth cycle, 60 days growth cycle. But for other species, it is not like that. They are shorter life cycle. So the seeding of raft is basically you need less manpower in case of Gillidiella acirosa. When we did some economic sensitivity analysis to find out which one is best profitable, we found Gillidiella acirosa is the maximum profit earner. This is because the Gillidiella acirosa market price is very high, followed by Dibilis and followed by Idilis and other algae. So another thing we found out that Idilis is not profitable in scenario of 5 tons and low range, and also scenario of 1 ton in low range. Now, when we talk about this is all about cultivation, but when we talk about strain improvement and better germplasm, one interesting study we have done, like all these algae, they have a different life cycle phases in their life cycle, and we found out that in case of Gracilaria dura, there is a opportunity where a different life cycle phases can be used for commercial farming. This is because they showed difference in growth rate, gel strength, etc. We can also develop various molecular markers to select the elite germplasm. Another study what we have done is we have seen whether any functional traits can be useful, because although life cycle phases show different kind of growth and yield pattern, but all the single life cycle stage cannot be used throughout the year. What we found out that functional state changes, and what we studied functional state are basically for growth rate and survival, because in certain period growth declines because plant cannot survive. So single life cycle phase cannot be used throughout the year. But we found that tetrasporophyte, which is a diploid phase, is better in case of growth, and gametophyte is better in case of survival. Now there is another interesting study our institute has done is tissue culture has been developed in case of Gildiella acidosa. And these tissue culture plantlets were basically cultivated in the sea at Tamil Nadu by my colleague Dr. Ganeshan. And he had shown that tissue culture progeny always basically gave a good growth as well as yield of agar from this study. So what we understood that there is a good possibility to develop a improved seed stock for large-scale commercial cultivation of Gildiella by using this method. Now, as we all were talking in the morning and several previous meetings, that seed is a problem. So our institute has undertaken a very ambitious project through CSIR to develop and standardize the protocol for seedling production by two ways. One is via clonal propagation, another via spore in two different Gracilaria species, Gracilaria dura and Gracilaria edulis. So we have used different combinations, different parameters to understand how with a minimum biomass we can generate maximum seed. And we have also developed our own medium, and we have understood that in 30 days time, basically this can be processed, and we have in a central position, I have shown you the figure, we have a seed running seawater facility at Mandapam, and right hand side it is shown that how spore based method can be used to produce a germplasm. So basically in a span of 2 to 3 months time, one can start from a small group of cells in case of clonal propagation, or a small number of cystocarps to achieve spores, and we can produce enough seed material. And currently we are looking at scaling up both these methods. I think I have come to the end of my talk. I just wanted to give few gaps and challenges. The first gap is we really don't know the what is the current biomass availability, because this particular algae is being cultivated in collected from Tamil Nadu. There is a lot of pressure on existing biomass. So we need to understand the precise availability, because when we want to go for commercial cultivation, natural biomass only is going to come as a seed stock. So this is very important thing. Second is if you see, except for marine hydrocolloids coaching, I don't think any of the other agar industries are utilizing modern technologies and methods. They are basically using old traditional energy intensive processes, and the production has not changed. It is still a small units. So there is an urgent need of government to basically upgrade all these facilities. The best part is we don't have to create new industries. Industries are already present. To my knowledge, there are 46 different agar and alginate industries in and around Madurai. So one can basically upgrade their industrial setup, and then we can, when we take up this agarophyte cultivation project, we can get a biomass and it can be processed to get a good quality agar, high yield, because the current yield is something around 7 to 8%, I was told. But we have been seeing, my colleagues have done very recently at fairly large scale practices, and we believe that getting 12 to 15% or even 20% is not very difficult in industry setup. So this is something very important. Second is prices of raw material has not changed in last several decades. And to my surprise, very recently I was told that even prices were reduced in last 2 3 years. Especially Gilidiella acidosa, which was around 120 rupees per kg, is now something around 60 rupees or 90 rupees. This is not going to help because ultimately people cannot
Dr.
cultivate
Vaibhav,
unless until they get the fair price for the crop. Then there is a national.
Dr. Vaibhav, can you just manage the time because there are
No,
other
no, I have
speakers here.
two sentences
Yeah.
to tell. If I can
Yeah.
tell, otherwise they are seen. There is no need also. I think I have
Okay.
I end here with my talk.
Okay.
Thank you so
Please.
much.
Thank you, Dr. Mantri. Thank you for your excellent address. And I think there is a lot of depth and knowledge which you have shared with us. So we move on to the next speaker. May I request Dr. V. Johnson to please address us. Dr. Johnson.
Most respected Secretary of Fisheries, Secretary Ministry of Fisheries, Director, Department of Fisheries, Tamil Nadu, and Directors of Fisheries, and the seaweed industries, academic life, and from research side. At the outset, I would like to thank the Indian Chamber of Commerce, Director General, and the Vice President, and all the organizers for giving me this wonderful opportunity. Before actually going into the topic, I would like to briefly narrate a small case wherein we were able to and transfer the seaweed farming to a new village in Tamil Nadu, especially.
Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Johnson. Sorry to interrupt you. As because of low bandwidth, your voice is breaking. So please switch off your video and continue with your audio so that the audio is much clearer. Thank you.
Hello?
Much better, much better.
Before entering into the actual topic, I would like to briefly narrate how we were able to introduce the farming village at 20, that is North Parkway, where it is aware about the seaweed farming. We created awareness, and then we asked the village leaders and the cooperative society leaders and important persons who are interested to come forward, and then we gave a training for 3 days, and later we have arrangement of meeting as well as the marketers of this industry. So they were, once they were convinced, they were all the materials is for monoline unit. So they were them.
Johnson, you are not able properly.
Hello.
Your voice is cracking, Dr. Johnson.
Actually, there is a poor internet activities there.
Can you briefly mention? Can you briefly mention your points because it is not audible at all? Yeah.
I think we could go to the next speaker. In the meantime, Mr. Johnson can try to fix his bandwidth issue, because the audio is not so clear. I think we should go to the next speaker till Mr. Johnson can fix his audio issue. Mr. Abhiram Seth, may I request you to please share your views? Kindly unmute.
Thanks a lot. And you can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll go to my presentation. Can I request you to please put my presentation for the sharing mode, please?
Yeah, sir, you can find the third icon in your panel
Yeah.
after the audio and video. That is the share content button. Click
Okay.
on that and select the PPT, which
Okay.
should be open in the background.
Sure.
Thanks.
Is it visible now?
No, sir, not yet.
Okay.
If you permit me, Mr. Abhiramanji, can I ask a question? I am Dr. Balaji.
Yeah.
We want basically implementable decisions in the sense from government perspective, which we should be in a position to implement in short term, means this current year, maybe in first next 2 years, next 5 years. Because one of the issue which the industry is happening to tell us is we have learned a lot of research, but many things are in the pilot stage, and many we are not ready. One view is that industry barring Kappa Fagus is not ready. Industry's view is. So we have to have a very clear, at the end of this conference or this meeting, we should have a very short-term goals, short-term decisions, which we can quickly roll out. And research has to be shared, but at the same time, how you transfer the research to field? What is inhibiting us? Why, if suppose if Dr. Mantriji has done good work, what is stopping the industry to take that? This is what we want to know, so that we can fill up the gaps. Otherwise, what is happening is, except Kappa Fagus, the industry is of the view that none of the other species, even though they're demonstrated in the lab level at the pilot scale, is not absolutely ready to put in the field. So we are looking at Atmanirbhar Bharat, and we have to be very crystal clear what we can do, what we can't do. And if we can't do, what is the procedure, what is an approach we have to take, learning from the best in the world. So that is like, I think that should be the our main focus. That will be quite useful if it can be, if the deliberation come out in that line. Thank you.
Sure, sir. Thank you, sir. First, at the very outset, I must say for the first time in my entire interaction in this sector, the concerned secretary and joint secretary have gone to the depth of the whole issues and have tried to understand the domain reality. So far, this kind of detailed planning and detailed attention to the whole sector was really not in place. So hopefully with this understanding, we should be able to move forward. And I must apologize, my presentation was not geared to the questions which you've asked, focused on that, but I will quickly go through it and highlight those aspects, particularly relating to why the industry is not taking up, and which stage of acceptance are the other cultivars in versus Kappa ficus and the whole application domain. So I'll quickly try to move forward. First, which has been highlighted by many speakers, that it is a high priority for the government directly been driven by the Prime Minister, has been on the domain for last almost 6-7 years in the priority list of the government. But we have not been able to make any significant progress in this domain in spite of the support from the top. You know, talking about the global market is a bit of a misnomer. It is like food processing sector, which I was associated for a long time. We would say we have so much milk, so much this, and we process very little. Ultimately, these are numbers which shows you the line of sight to what can be achieved. But as Dr. Balaji highlighted, we have to focus on what we can do and what we can't do in the near future terms. If we look at the species which are cultivated, clearly almost 40% plus is Kappa Yukima group. So they dominate. Gracilaria, which is cultivated in a larger way, is done in Chile, which is a cold water species. They are the large cultivation producers. In most other places, to limited extent, it has succeeded. In India, if you look at the cultivation, I'll quickly go through it. This is most people are familiar with it. It clearly provides a line of sight if you do kappa cultivation to provide a sustainable livelihood to the people. Now, this cultivation is largely carried out by small groups coming from the fishing community. Wherever the people are drawn from outside the fishing community to do the cultivation, conflicts often arise. But if they are from the same community, they have a very interesting method of coming at a viable working medium which safeguards the interests of all the stakeholders. Because if they come from the fishing community, the conflict with fishermen is avoided because there is a mutual give and take which arrives at an optimal solution. In India, the cultivation was growing rapidly till 2013. And after that, with the sudden rise in the sea temperature, the biomass lost its vigor, and in spite of all the interventions, is not reaching the productivity levels which the farmers were used to. To achieve this, clearly one thing which has been highlighted a lot by the ministry as well as by Weber, the fundamental thing is we need improved planting material availability. This may be achieved by import, it may be achieved by tissue culture. So a large scale production facility has to be created for this planting material. It has to be done on a corporate basis with private sector participation. It can't be a project driven project because projects have a finite timeline and they extinguish after that. This has to be a sustainable effort because you need to put in a company which keeps producing it. And our suggestion has been for this to set up a Section 8 company so that, unlike the seed business in agriculture, this is not a profit driver. You make profit by buying the material and processing it. Seed material is provided to the farmers at the most effectively cost-effective prices so that they can grow this cultivation. For this, the modules which were described for tissue culture as well as spore culture, taking that knowledge and putting them into a manufacturing format is the critical requirement. Collections are going down. For this, the point made by Dr. Weber is very, very critical. We need to have a thorough assessment of the standing crop. You know, the crop which we had estimated, a lot of changes have taken place. In the data which is there available on the domain, Lakshadweep had a large standing biomass. But the other day, in the national consultation, the Lakshadweep team said that there is hardly any biomass left because the turtles have grazed almost all of it. Now, so what is the objective reality today? I think it's a very, very important aspect which needs to be determined so that we clearly know what will be the natural biomass available uh, for exploitation and what would be the regeneration rate of the same. So this is another area which we need to clearly look at it. Dr. Balaji, you asked a question. Whether it is Edulis, whether it is Jura, they are in pilot stage. We are working on both these, but at this moment, the available biomass is so small that it is being run like on a by hiring a staff to do it on daily wages basis. It has not reached a stage where we have sufficient biomass for planting material to give it to the farmers. We have to reach that stage. And I would like to share with you, when copper ficus cultivation started, we had only 50 to 100 kg of material. That 100 kg for almost 3 years was multiplied and then given to the farmers by PepsiCo at that point of time when I was with PepsiCo and we were driving the system. I think the same kind of rigor, both for the tissue culture facility as well as multiplication of the natural biomass, needs to be done. And uh, we are committed to doing it along with other industry partners. And I think this is something which we have to appreciate. They have potential, but we have to produce the seed stock large enough to actually do the validation trial at the farmer economics level. Right now, we have got R&D economics level, but farmer economics and R&D economics often can have gaps. So that is what we need to determine. Second aspect, which is very important, I think we all need to understand very clearly in this domain. And I think this is based on multiple experiments and struggles we as a company have gone through. In India, the domain, the important products which will drive this category are going to be biostimulants for agriculture, animal nutrition, and nutraceuticals. And in the higher order work, edible packaging and other things. But clearly, hydrocolloids in the short-term period are difficult to crack. These are used in very small quantities in food, in high-grade food products, and or in the laboratory applications. To make a significant breakthrough on these categories takes a lot of time, because to build the confidence, and I always use this example. If you take ice cream, for example, this is a simpler example. 1 ton of ice cream uses 1 kg of mix, ice cream mix, in which carrageenan is one of the ingredient at about 5 to 10% level. Now, this 1 kg product, people are buying from established players who have been supplying them for 15 years. Even if you are providing it cheaper or whatever be the basis, the ice cream company is not easily willing to shift, because this product, which may be 1,000 rupees a kg, goes into 1 ton of ice cream, and the ice cream they sell for $60,000 to $200,000 per ton. So it is insignificant cost in their matrix. So we have to be very clearly understanding this. In contrast, the biostimulants and animal nutrition domains are huge. We were just looking at the data and based on the trials on animal nutrition which are available, the target which has been set at the end of 5 years could actually be utilized if we get a penetration of just 2% in animal nutrition domain. And that could increase the productivity of cattle by almost 10%. So these are the domains which we should be focusing on and driving these initiatives. Because bacterial grade agar used by the labs is not a mega quantity. It is a small quantity. It is not going to drive the livelihood vertical and the cultivation initiatives which we are talking about. It is an important area to work on, but it is not going to be a short-term driver. It is something which can be taken up. In this context, you have to look at the cultivation also in the same context. When a person is growing kappa, around it, if he puts 10 rafts of gracilaria and he looks at it as a bonus which he will get at the end of 100 days, he will take up that cultivation. But if you try to convert it into his daily wage rate and look at low growth algae and then say his cost of production is 100 rupees and industry should buy it at 100 rupees, when imported algae of the same or in the same algae is being available in the international market at $300 a ton, so or $500 a ton, that's not going to happen. So I think the mindset and strategy has to be different, that there is an anchor crop and these crops are being done on the side by the farmer and have to be evaluated in a, his full labor can't be allocated to it. It is only marginal labor which can go into it, which is nominal. And then the viability starts looking a lot better. So globally, the markets are driven by hydrocolloid and food and beverage application. We don't have that much application area here. So as I mentioned, we will have to focus on biostimulants, animal nutrition, and then quickly move to human nutrition. And in today's context, when antiviral properties of any ingredient which can be produced at an affordable price and delivered to the large parts of the population are becoming a very important dimension. And I think seaweeds can play a very important role because immune modulation response shows significant improvement when given seaweeds has been demonstrated both by cattle and poultry. It is a domain we should very quickly check it out going into human trials because toxicological clearances are already available with the science system. For this product, it has already been tested by ITRC and found to be completely safe for human consumption. Biostimulants, one has to look at it in context of what they can deliver. If by using a small dose of biostimulant, you can increase productivity by 25% or reduce fertilizer consumption by 20%, it is huge. It actually delivers instantaneously once the adoption takes place. The target given by the Prime Minister of reducing 25% reduction in chemical fertilizers. It delivers it straight away. However, we are at a stage where even the standard or the notification governing it under FCO is in a wider domain circulated, but it is not been notified. So at multiple state levels, the producers have challenges where they are stopped from marketing the product and they go to courts, get stay orders, and then market it. So rather than facilitative, it is impeding something which is going to be of great impact, positive impact for the Indian farming community, reduce chemical load of fertilizers on the soil, and actually help invigorate the soil. And these are some of the stories which you see on the screen. 25, 28%. These are fantastic numbers. And I can tell you they are not based on low base effect. It is not that the productivity was low and they have got higher increases. They are at standard, higher than standard productivity done by the university trials and delivered these. So animal nutrition, the detailed reports are going to be released by CSIR system soon. But basically what we have found is there is improved feed consumption rate, improved productivity, weight gain by both cattle and poultry, better egg production, both in terms of quality of eggs as well as timing of egg. You get almost 18 days advancement in egg production based on the studies which we have carried out so far. And then there are future things. You do food grade algae. It's a big sector, but it's going to take time to reach there. In 10 years of cultivation efforts, starting in 2005, almost 15 years later, we have reached very little. So these will also take time, but these are clearly worth striving for. And I think taking up food algae cultivation on a mission mode in places like Lakshadweep, uh, where there is no pollution, where you can produce high grade algae, clearly is an opportunity area. And we as an industry would be very keen to participate in that aspect. Uh, and biopolymers, see, it's a bit of a challenge. And I think this is what we need to understand. You keep increasing the price of the algae for the farmer, you make applications like biopolymers and biofuels more distant. So if we can work in conjunction where we improve the income of the farmers by improving productivity of their strains and keeping the algae price low, will open up a much wider market. So I think there's a balance which needs to be struck. And I think this understanding is extremely critical uh, for us to move forward. Outstanding nutraceutical work has been done by CMFRI, but this needs to reach the wider market. And I think we need to look at a much wider engagement in this sector because these products are there, but they are not in wide usage. Uh, so basically, coming back to the question which you asked, we need to rejuvenate our planting material. We need to clearly bring in Euchemus spinosum into Indian cultivation system because this is an algae which is not that intolerant to salinity changes. So this is very, very critical to bring in. And process for import, if it can be made like what was done for Vanami in the by bringing it under the domain of the fish categories, would be a game changer. The other thing is, a lot of people talk about exotic versus non-exotic. And I think we need to understand the entire success stories of Indian agriculture have been delivered by exotics. The green revolutions on which it was built was the rice which we brought from IRI, Philippines, and the wheat which strains which we got from Mexico. Vanami has changed the complex of the whole uh, mariculture industry in India. So same thing we need to replicate for seaweeds also. And great part is now there is a decision, I believe, where National Center for Sustainable Coastal Management, along with CSMCRI and CMFRI, are going to prepare a strategy for utilizing the Gulf areas. And the earlier it happens, better it is. And it would also be revalidation of something which was suggested as early as 2003 by the National Academy of Agriculture Sciences by releasing their policy document number 22. And it would be almost an endorsement of something which was suggested and accepted, but not implemented. And we have to understand the bulk of the cultivation will take place in Gulf areas. It is not going to be taken up in high seas. Similarly, a clear policy on collection and harvesting is scientific based approach to define the rules and regulations of this, for which we have the domain expertise with CSMCRI and CMFRI, should be laid out very clearly. And one thought I have is that GIS-based survey for suitable site mapping should be carried out and put on public domain because this data should be available for any company or any group which is wanting to get into cultivation, that these are the potential cultivation sites. Right now, I can say that almost every 15 days, we get a request from some group or the other wanting to take up seaweed cultivation. And we, to our best of our ability, try to provide them information. But if proper mapping and is available and put on a website for public sharing, it will create a huge spurt of innovators and small startups taking up cultivation. And by announcing the prices in advance of the collected seaweeds, I think we can create a very, very strong positive movement, because then the people know that what are they going to get for their efforts. And I don't think income delta between cultivation and natural harvest is that steep. Even natural harvesting, people are able to earn between 500 to 800 rupees a day. Basically, I highlighted this, that we need to provide a viable income matrix to the farmers. An undue focus on the prices could move the prices up to a point where many application areas may become unviable. So we have to create a balance between them. And the introduction of insurance schemes. And I think for the next 5 years, supporting universities and research institutions for creating better cultivars through breeding or doing more application areas is really the way forward. And I think India can become the India can become a major producer, and we can provide livelihood to a serious number of people, and we can contribute to reducing fertilizer usage by 25%, and can be a major input for organic agriculture, which people are talking about, for which there is good global acceptance, by bridging the gap between chemical supported agriculture and organic production. And I think the funds which you have been put aside for this are more than adequate. I think if we are able to use them effectively, we should be able to reach the destination which we are wanting to go to. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Seth, for your very, very interesting points to highlight. Now, you have already created a place for Dr. Arup Ghosh to present his subject, Response to Crop and Soil to Seaweed Biostimulants. Dr. Arup Ghosh is the principal scientist, CSIR, CSI. Over to Dr. Arup Ghosh.
Tapanji, you are able to hear me up?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But the problem
Please.
is my share button is not active. Can you upload the presentation from there?
Have you sent the presentation?
Yes, yes. Let me share it for you.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
My share button is not active over here.
Okay. No issue. Suman will do that.
Okay. Yes. So just to make 2 points, 2 comments regarding what Mr. Abhiram just now said. First one is about regulation. So I got a call from Ministry of Agriculture today saying that seaweed biostimulants will now be under FCO, and it will be just 1 or 2 months from now that the process will be formalized. And second thing about the animal feed products which CSIR has jointly developed, and we are going to release the report somewhere around 3rd week of September. So these are the two things which I would like to reply. Okay, so now what I wanted to tell is about the biostimulants used in agriculture. Very important point is that seaweed biostimulants are very carbon neutral, because it is having I just lost the presentation view. Parichaya?
Sumon, Sumon, the presentation is not visible. Yeah, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Please continue.
Yeah. So we have the expertise of different biostimulants. Next, please. Next. Yeah. So the success of the technology actually was due to production of two products from wet biomass of Carpophycus alvarezi. So earlier carrageenan was made from dry seaweed, but the process was made attractive so as to yield the sap, which is 65% of the biomass, and the semi-refined carrageenan and carrageenan from it. So based on this, the industry actually set up, which was startup. Aquagri was basically a startup. It established the industry after licensing it, and now the product is marketed by the fertilizer major IFCO under the brand name of Sagarika. Similarly, we have transferred the technology to several other entrepreneurs, and I think with the advent of this ambitious 1 million ton production of seaweed biomass, there would be many other industries that would actually come. Next, please. Next slide. Yeah. So this is regarding multi-locational crop studies, which we did all over the India. Next, please. In this next slide, in this you can see that there were several institutions like 43 agricultural universities and Indian Council of Agricultural Research Institutes were collaborated by us, and that is how we came to know that this biostimulant is very much having the potential to increase the yield of crops by anywhere around 11 to 36% depending on the dose and the crop. Here you can see, like for rice crop only, the first figure, we had more than 25 locations where we found that the yield increase was phenomenal. So similarly, we did for maize, for green gram, black gram, soybean, this sugarcane, potato, and many other crops. Not all the results are there, but there were many other crops like vegetables. A very recent development is next, please. Very recent development, which of course I have not shown the data, that we had a tremendous improvement in the yields of high value horticultural crops, including spices. So they had a very good, crop yield improvement of spice, that is saffron, and also stevia for steviosides, as well as for the flower crop calla lily. So this was validated by our another CSIR institute, that is IHBT, that is in Palampur, Himachal Pradesh. So with the new results, I think the scope of the use of these biostimulants extends not only to the agricultural crops, but also to many of the high value horticultural crops. This is the sort of the pie chart gives how much is the yield improvement. I told you that nowhere in the world such extensive studies were simultaneously carried out in any of the biostimulants. We carried about 171 trials, simultaneous trials over the over the 5-year period. And not only there were this 171 agro trials, there were also demonstration trials. Next, please. There were several demonstration trials that were actually done over a lot more area, that is 1 acre. Okay, the slide which you can see is
you have the potential to decrease at least 25% of the chemical fertilizer consumption when you use this biostimulant along with this biostimulant. Next, please. So this is actually, I mean, when you do this 25% reduction from the policy point of view, it is very important because chemical fertilizers do have a lot of carbon footprint when I mean, during their process manufacture in the industry. So when you decrease the carbon footprint inputs, so ultimately the yield increase which you get is also, I mean, having a low carbon footprint value attached. So overall, the carbon footprint per unit of produce in India, it gets drastically reduced. So even from the global climate change policy also, the seaweed biostimulant should become a part and parcel of the Indian agriculture. And the policy point of view, I mean, based on different trials which we have already conducted, many of the other state governments also should actually carry out similar trials and give recommendations in their state package of practice for the crops. Then coming to the biostimulant constituents, this is another important thing that different biostimulants from different seaweeds will definitely have different chemical composition as well. As you can see, this is the example of Capophycus alvarezi, and this is compared with the cold water species, that is Ascophyllum nodosum, that is grown in Canada or some other cold countries. We can see the, I mean, just to give an example of amino acid profile, they are very much comparable to the Indian. This aqua sap is actually the Indian Capophycus sap. And there are very many other constituents which are significantly present in much more higher quantity, like the growth hormones or indole acetic acid, gibberellin, then quaternary ammonium compounds like glycine butane, which also imparts stress tolerance. Next, please. Yeah, please. Yeah, again. Okay, so this is something science part which we did, that the plants do have their own inherent mechanism about stress tolerance, drought tolerance basically. But I mean, when you use this biostimulant, what happens? The photosynthetic efficiency of the plants gets better, and due to which this oxide radicals formation, which is very harmful to the plants, gets reduced. As a result, the enzymatic process like SOD, it decreases, and the quenching, I mean, the ROS quenching, that is ROS quenching enzymes like ascorbate peroxidase, catalase, they actually increase by application of seaweed biostimulant. So this is the science part. Please, next, please. So overall, next again. So overall, I mean, the proline improvement is there in the plants, and this decrease the lipid peroxidation. Earlier, I had told that the photosynthetic process by application of the seaweed biostimulants, it improves the photosynthetic efficiency of the crop plants. You can see a very good electron transport rate, then the photosynthesis rate, then water use efficiency, and this FeFM ratio indicative of stress tolerance. Next, please. Okay, so some of the slides I will very quickly skip. This is just to show that this biostimulant is very effective in drought condition, and in India, you might actually know that we have many, I mean, intermittent drought spells. So where the rainfall is not there, so in between that creates a soil moisture deficit, and this is important. I mean, useful if we do this biostimulant. Then please, next, please. Okay, so you can also see that we have done extensive studies on crop plants, like plant parts, even under drought condition, when you do with this SAP application, the nitrogen content will increase as compared to when you do not apply the biostimulant. So actually, what in a nutshell, I'll just explain the, I mean, the mechanism that these biostimulants itself does not contain any great amount of nutrients in terms of N, P or K. But what it does is, whatever is present in the soil, it actually helps them to efficiently take up. So that is how, I mean, the improvement in nutrient content in the plants takes place. And we have proved this phenomena by several latest biotechnological tools. Next, please. Please go next. Okay, again, next. Okay, so I mean, if somebody is having interest in the science part, they can just go to the paper and just find out the details. But here I will also tell you that there were many enhanced transport related transcripts, that are the genes, which explain better uptake of phosphorus and iron by the plants under stress conditions as well. So next, please. Next. 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 Yeah. So no, I mean the earlier one. Yeah, this one. Okay, so I skipped many slides just to make a gist in this slide, that all the mechanistic understanding of how the seaweed biostimulants actually work in agriculture is enumerated in this slide itself. So there is enhanced nitrogen, phosphorus, copper and iron uptake, better nitrogen assimilation in the plants due to enhanced nitrate transport, and better sulfur metabolism by enhancing the cysteine synthase enzyme, which is actually also important for antioxidant GSH and GSSG. Then key enzymes responsible for fatty acid synthesis is upregulated. There is a reduced starch degradation, that is why you get an increased yield of the crops. Then enhanced cell wall synthesis leading to protection against osmotic balance. Even there is DNA damage caused by stress. What it does is it actually increases the enzyme activity associated with repairing of DNA damage, and the reduced gibberellic acid hormone signaling actually helps in giving the stress tolerance. So any detail anybody wants, we have a published paper. You can just find it out from there. Next, please. Yeah, so this particular slide is more about how it affects the soil. So anybody can say that what is the effect of biostimulant on soil, and by this study, which we tried to prove that in case you use this biostimulant, it is also good for the diverse bacterial communities that is present in the soil. In under drought conditions, these bacterial communities gets severely hampered, and if you do this biostimulant spray or application on the crop, very surprisingly, the counts are even at par to the control, which is well watered condition. Next, please. Yeah, so this is what I told you, that the policy point of view, why should biostimulant be an integral part of the Indian agriculture? We have several papers wherein we have documented. This was for the first time anybody in the world might have documented the actual figures of numerical, how much is the climate change impact gained by use of biostimulants in Indian agriculture. Next, please. Okay, this is also the same thing. Next, I would like to say that this is seaweed biostimulant is having extremely low carbon footprint, that is 118.6 kilogram per ton of this seaweed biostimulant produced. And we have actually modeled the industry, that is Aqua-Agri, during their production. So it is actually a very, ecological biostimulant input, organic input for agriculture. Okay, so the other things which I told was about Carpophycus, but we have done so many trials for the Gracilaria edulis biostimulant as well. Similar to the numbers of what trials we did for Carpophycus, we also did a lot of many trials in lot many crops at lot many different situations. The same similar type of number 164 diverse trials in different crops were done in India in 20 states. And the improvement of the crops due to Gracilaria edulis was also very high. In fact, in states like Karnataka, where they have actually put out a recommendation for the state for the rice and maize crop, they actually wanted to do it for Gracilaria edulis. But but due to the want of biomass, they were not able to do it. But Gracilaria edulis, as earlier told, that the biomass this is a slow growing species. So once the production starts, because earlier also I have discussed that the price that Gracilaria edulis gets, I mean, if it is cultivated, not the case of collection, but if it is cultivated, it is very low. So that is a impediment for cultivation of Gracilaria species. The options might be, I mean, to jack up the prices somewhere around 2 to 2.5 times, or what Mr. Seth said, that Kappa ficus can be the anchor species, and these other species can actually go side by side along with them. So these are some possible scenarios which one has to look for. But certainly, again, I reiterate that Gracilaria species is very slow growing comparative to Kappa ficus. So if the growers get the same price as that of Kappa ficus, it is never going to take up. So the industry, as well as the government, as well as the institutions, to improve the productivity or to actually introduce strains which are having better productivity than what we currently have, are the solutions which one has to ponder. Next, please. Yeah, so not only Gracilaria, we have also developed technology based on sargassum, that is collected seaweed, and we have demonstrated that they are also equally effective in improving the yield of crops. You can see the onion. Then next, please. Next slide. Yeah, similarly for groundnut as well as apple, this is a very good instance of apple, wherein the Jammu Kashmir farmers who are actually using this biostimulant actually came down to Gujarat to just say that all the government officials as well as the agricultural university officials, that this sargassum biostimulant has proved a very good, I mean, improvement. I mean, it has improved the luster of the apple, the shine of it, and they have noticed a considerable reduction in fruit drop. Okay, next, please. Next, please. Yeah. So this is my final slide, and we have recognition as well. And I think the government's initiative of targeting 1 lakh, this 1 million tons of wet weed is very much realistic. But there are issues which should be actually tackled very tactfully. And I'm sure with the help of with the cooperation of institutes, research institutes, then industries, and government sector, I think we all will be able to achieve it. So we have to go together. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ghosh. I think you have given, just before starting this presentation, you have given a very good information to the biostimulant sector all across the country. And we hope that the guidelines will be released in a very short time. That is a long-awaited things from this for the biostimulant sector. Now, I would request Dr. Srikumar Suchanaran, Managing Director, C6 Energy Private Limited. Dr. Suchanaran will speak on as an industrial raw materials for large-scale applications.
Right.
Can you
So,
oh,
yeah, you'll have to project my presentation.
yeah. Suman, can you upload the presentation of Dr.
Sure. Two seconds, please.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can you just make it full screen? Yeah. Thank you very much. So, as Mr. Balaji, Dr. Balaji requested, I will try and use my presentation to provide some input. So that while that is not the original purpose, so I'm going to talk about. Can we just mute the microphones, please? So I'm just going to talk about very large scale applications of seaweed. I mean, where we think that where C6 has been working on applications for seaweed as an industrial raw material. And I'd like to tell you what some of the challenges are and how I think we can overcome that. So the next slide, please. Hello. The next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So this is a map of sea surface temperatures, and the only reason around the world, and the only reason that I projected is to show that around India and around Southeast Asia are some of the warmest seas on this planet. And the temperature of the water is related to the amount of solar energy that falls on it. And as if we have to think of seaweeds as a source as agriculture, we are blessed with a lot of solar energy. And we really have to think of seaweed cultivation as the next frontier of agriculture. So in these warm countries, and as speaker after speaker has been pointing out, there are maybe a handful of varieties of seaweed that are cultivated. Most of them which are cultivated in the cold water regions, where the areas where the colors are green are all the laminaria species and the mac kelps. But if you look at the tropical regions, the areas where they're red, they're basically restricted to a few tropically grown seaweed species. And if you can, next slide, please. So, and one of the reasons, and that people have been restricting themselves a lot to Carpophicus, Euchumia, and Gracilaria is because when you go to industrial cultivation, one of the things that is really important for any farmer to know is to have a good knowledge of the agronomy of the crop. You want a history of the crop. You want to know how the crop behaves. You want to know, you have years of data on the crop. And really speaking, these are the three species that have more than 15 to 30 years of cultivation history behind them. And therefore, for any entrepreneur or for anybody who wants to invest on very large scale seaweed cultivation, it's really important to have reliable crops or reliable species where there's been a huge history of cultivation. So that's one of the reasons these crops are so profitable, so popular. Next slide, please. So just to give you an idea of how widespread this is, if you take that green shaded area on this globe, and that basically represents an area of plus or minus 20 degrees of the equator. And all the red dots that you see here are actually proven sites of cultivation around the globe. So as you can see, India is of course there, but a lot of the cultivation sites are to the right of India on Indonesia. Of course, there's Tanzania, and there is also South America and Central America. But as you can see, the whole globe, there is a huge possibility for cultivation. And if you look at the position of India and right next to Sri Lanka, and if you look right below it, the whole of the Indian Ocean to the left and to the right. So yeah, that's okay. Please go to the next slide. The next slide. Yeah. Thank you. Just wait. Yeah. So the sea plant biomass, as I've said, is an extremely versatile plant material. I mean, if you look at agriculture today, if you take you take an industrial crop like maize or sugarcane, there are so variety of raw material, variety of final products that can be made from it. Similarly, with sea plant, it has been restricted to food. and a few high-priced food ingredients, like what was explained. If you look at the curve that I have here, on the vertical axis, it's actually the price of the seaweed, and on the horizontal axis is the volume that you're required to fulfill the various applications. So on the very top left-hand side, it starts with pharmaceuticals, chemicals, nutraceuticals, and as you go down the curve, the amount of seaweed biomass that is needed to fulfill each of this, all the way down to bulk food, renewables, bioplastics, biofuel. There are two requirements here. One is you need very, very large quantities of seaweed to actually make a dent in these applications. And secondly, the price needs to come down dramatically to make even these applications economically viable. Now, today, our current economic viability, which I've indicated with the red arrow, is such, of course, it depends on the labor cost and the place around the world, is such that it's probably just suited to somewhere between specialty food ingredients like carrageenan or agar, or to a little bit to agri and feed ingredients. That's really where the sweet spot is. But really speaking, if you're talking about bulk food, renewables, bioplastics, it really has to come down quite a lot. So for this, you have to understand, what actually drives the cost of seaweed. Next slide, please. Now, one of the things we do already understand about seaweed cultivation, that it's extremely labor intensive. If you compare seaweed cultivation to land agriculture. Now, unlike land agriculture, where you have first of all, the cost of the land, and then there is the cost of inputs, fertilizer, NPK, and then there is irrigation water, and then there is pesticide, weedicide, and then finally there is the cost of labor. But when you go to seaweed cultivation, all of this disappears. There is no cost for land, literally, because we have huge swaths of sea. There is no cost for irrigation water, because literally everything is there in the sea. There is no cost for fertilizer and pesticides, because the sea plants are well adapted to growing in nature. But the only part is labor. The only expense is labor. And it's extremely labor intensive. If you've tried to, I know many of us who have tried to walk in a swimming pool and try to work when you're in a swimming pool, you know how difficult it is to work in water. So that is why seaweed cultivation is very, very labor intensive. See, there is labor involved in, if you look at the picture, that's from different parts of the world, these pictures have been taken. The women are tying the seaweed. It's a very labor intensive job. Then the men go out into the sea to tie the seaweed. And then again, you have to haul the seaweed out of the water. It's very, once the seaweed comes out of the water, it weighs 10 times the weight in water. So it's really expensive and labor intensive. So it's clear that if we have to, if India intends to be a big player in the seaweed industry, I know it's very important right now. We have hardly an industry. We have to bring up the cultivation. We have to give people jobs. But if you really, as a country, we want to expand and explore the potential of seaweed, we should be thinking ahead also. With the same number of people, we should be producing 100 times the amount of seaweed. And that's only possible if you can mechanize and lower. And we should be starting to think about it right now as we are beginning to reboot our entire seaweed industry. Or otherwise, we will just continue to be followers. The carrageenan market, as Mr. Sheth explained, is already saturated. People don't have an incentive to change. So we really need to be looking at new applications. Next slide, please. Yeah. And so, of course, mechanization can lower costs. And there are many ways to mechanize it. And, as a company, we have also been working on it. And one of the ways to mechanize it is to actually say, as demonstrated in the picture in the center, is to grow the seaweed. And this happens to be Capophycus alvarizii growing in tube nets. And you can put the seaweed into tube nets, and the pipe that you see on the right hand side of the tube nets are coming out. It's a mechanized system which actually puts the tube nets. And on the left hand side picture is actually what we call the sea combine. Now, again, the analogy to land agriculture is something that we should not ignore. In land agriculture, while it's good to have manual cultivation, the real productivity comes by using some forms of mechanization, tractors, tillers, those kind of things. And nothing like that exists today in seaweed cultivation, definitely not for tropical seaweeds. And we have to really start investing in these kind of things. And so the C Combine on the left-hand side is a machine that we have developed, which integrates automatic seeding and harvesting of Kappa ficus. So, I mean, what happens is that the seaweed is laid out in long tube nets, as you can see on the picture on the right-hand side. And then next slide, please. And as you can see in this picture, these are the size and the depth of seaweed farms that can be laid out. Now, square kilometers of farm in very, very long areas. All these parallel things that you see in the water, they're all seaweed farms, which are laid out in very large areas. I mean, this is a picture of the coast of Indonesia where we also operate. But these are the things that, that can be done. They are feasible. Next slide, please. So as you can see, what happens is typically the picture on the left indicates how when you seed the tube net, after the growth cycle is over, all the seaweed begins to grow out of the tube net. And so one can think of making machines that can take out the seaweed that is growing from outside of the tube net. There's a machine that has been invented on the right. All of these are published. They're all patented, so one can go and read the patents. So we call this a crown cutter. It can automatically harvest the tube net, and then it has machinery so that you can also completely remove the seaweed that's inside of the tube net and recycle the tube net for further use. And as you can see in the picture in the center, the C Combine can actually go over seaweed farms and carry out this automatic seeding, harvesting, and seeding. Next slide, please. As a result, I believe that it's already possible to bring down the cost of seaweed dramatically. Today, the international prices of seaweed for Kappa ficus range anywhere around $1,500 per ton. It can vary anywhere from $800 a ton, from $1,000 a ton to even $2,000 a ton, and that's really expensive. But we believe that by next year itself, when mechanization comes in, we believe it should be possible to drop the prices so that even things like we're beginning to approach things like renewable chemicals and plastics. And in the next 5 years, I believe it should be possible to get the prices of seaweed down with mechanization, even down to the cost where biofuel can become viable. Now, all of this can be done without in any way reducing the amount of employment, because you have every person producing much more seaweed. We can bring down the cost of the seaweed production, be able to give livelihood employments to. It's almost like traditional fishing boats versus mechanized fishing boats. And that's really the way to go. You can go out, you can make much more. Only the only difference being in this case, especially in seaweed, it is a completely sustainable raw material. The more you grow, we have so much seeds, the more you grow, the more you can harvest the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, the more you can replace many of the things like plastics or fuels or even improve agricultural productivity and so on and so forth. So what I'm going to do right now is just to show you, I'll give you a glimpse of what is really now possible when seaweed prices can be lowered. So the next slide, please. Of course, one of the things that everybody, including many speakers have talked about, is the ability of seaweed extracts to improve agricultural growth. And there are many ways to do it. Now, for example, we have our own kind of product that we have made. We call it AgroGain. It's based, the mechanism of action and the active ingredient is very different here. It actually uses a very, very specific molecular weight length of sulfated galacto-oligosaccharide from the sea plant. So we actually have to do a little bit of sophisticated processing to isolate a very specific molecular weight length. And that molecular weight thing is the actual active ingredients. I mean, it's a patented product. The patents have been granted in several countries across the world. But again, as you can see, as more than one speaker has demonstrated, this is an amazing product. And, we were very proud to say that, India can not only have a big boost in agriculture by using biostimulants, we can also export these biostimulants to many other countries in the world. And unlike all the other biostimulants that are available in the world today, which are made from brown seaweeds like the Canadian kelp or whatever else, making biostimulants from cultivated tropical red seeds is completely sustainable and completely scalable, because the wild harvested seaweed, the biostimulants made from wild harvested seaweeds, they're all made from wild harvested beds, right? I mean, it's like going to a forest and cutting it down. There is a limited supply available. They are not cultivated seaweeds. But biostimulants made from cultivated red seaweeds are infinitely scalable. So we have India has a big potential here, because India has been a leader in having the kind of scientific institutions which have pioneered this kind of work. We have the will to do it. We have the people to do it. I think we can be a leader in the world. Next slide, please. Yeah. So another product that is very interesting. Now, India, especially, now this is a picture where we have another very, very specific extract that we can make from the seaweed. Again, the patents on this are published. We find that seaweed extracts of very specific molecular weight can stimulate plant systems, innate. So, the traditional approach to agriculture has been to use pesticides and insecticides to kill the insects, and to use fertilizers to create nutrients in the plant. As you just saw, biostimulants represent a very interesting addition to the fertilization regime, where they can improve the efficiency of fertilizer usage and many other things on the plant. Similarly, one can use seaweed extracts to actually increase the plant's own ability to resist attack. Now, a tropical country like India, we have a lot of viral attacks. For example, in this particular picture, you see papaya ring spot virus, which decimates the papaya crop in and around, say, places like Karnataka or whatever else. You can wipe out a papaya crop, and there are no cures for a viral attack. Or even in tomato, you get tomato leaf curl virus. We can take seaweed extracts, very, very specific fractions, and we can actually activate the plant's own defense systems such that it can actually overcome this viral attack. And this has been, and I understand that, and this has been developed along with the University of Agricultural Sciences in Bangalore, and it is now part of the package of practices of the University of Agricultural Sciences in Bangalore. So, so this is actually a very interesting new product. The next slide, please. Well, for animal feed again, and I completely agree with all the other speakers, we can make this particular product represents, fisheries, for instance. Vanamai has been a big success story for India, but it has also had its problems. For example, vibriosis, disease, white spot syndrome virus, and we have found that we can create immunostimulants from seaweeds, which can actually give stress tolerance and vibriosis resistance. And this has been actually published, and it has been this product is available is being sold in the market. So there are very interesting products. But what I'm really interested about is actually what I'm going to show you next. So let's go forward. Now, next slide, please. Yeah. We can make biodegradable replacements for plastics. And these are actually proof that this can be done. For example, we can make sheets, pouches, even straws, and all of this, whatever you're seeing on the screen, has been made from tropical red Kappa ficus kind of seaweed. And if you look at the properties of such a material, next slide, please. If you look at the properties of such a material, for example, in the first column, you see compostable sea plant-based sheets. That's what we call our material. Next one is A4 paper, and the next one is plastic sheets. And you look at the various parameters, whether it's the grammage, the tensile strength, the elongation at break, the break force, break distance. All of these are very, very comparable to plastic. And so this is a very distinct possibility that we can make. If you can make the seaweed cheap enough, all of this can become possible. Next slide, please. It doesn't just stop there. You see, one of the very interesting things about Carpophycus, for instance, is the fact that it is, it's, you know, as everybody has said, it has got carrageenan as a main polymer. And carrageenan has a very interesting structure. It has got galactose and anhydrogalactose. Now, it turns out that if you take this particular seaweed biomass and subject it to high temperature and a certain kind of a hydrolysis, you can get a lot of 5-hydroxymethyl furfural. Now, 5-hydroxymethyl furfural, next. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Can we switch to the next slide, please? Yes, as you can see, and this is, I mean, this is not, this has been well published. It's a 2018 paper in Chemical Reviews. You can see from 5-hydroxymethyl furfural, you can make alkanes, you can make all kinds of chemicals, which are very, very interesting platform chemicals. So, I mean, we have to begin to think about seaweeds as, and, you know, not just in terms of current applications, but kind of move ahead as a curve, as a trajectory to what all is possible with this amazing resource, and, you know, our own determination that we must be the leaders. So if you like to see, if you'd like to stretch where we can go to, if you go to the next slide, please. You know, the miracle of seaweed doesn't just stop there. We have already shown, for example, that you can take sea plant biomass, which is this little petri dish on the left side, and using a process called hydrothermal liquefaction, you can actually make crude oil. The bottle on the right is crude oil. And, you know, if you look at the composition of the crude, the next slide, please. This is a GCMS, you know, GCMS is a way of analyzing the crude. It's very similar to the kind of composition that you get in natural crude. Now, why are we saying this? Now, you imagine that you look at all the crude oil that India buys. Now, India is one of the largest importers of crude oil in the world. Okay, if you we, you know, last year we know in 2025 we are going to import a lot of crude oil, but all of this crude oil first goes into refineries, and from the refineries it becomes petrol, diesel, plastic, whatever else you know, pharmaceuticals, chemicals. But imagine if all of the crude oil could actually come from seaweed. Then everything that you make from that refinery, whether it's petrol or diesel, is all renewable, and you can trace it. It's not I mean, you can make out what's a renewable petrol and a diesel. You can make it out from a fossil fuel derived petrol and diesel. So all this is possible. Can you just go to the next slide, please? And I just want to give you an idea of size. Yeah, this is supposed to be a video where I was going to show you how crude oil actually can be ignited, but since we are on but you know, this slide is very important when you to get an idea of what the possibilities are. So, if you imagine that we set ourselves a target like we want to make crude oil, and you know, in 2025, India's crude oil imports are likely to exceed 250 million tons. And roughly, if you want to make biofuels, you need 4 tons of dry biomass to make 1 ton of biofuel or crude oil. Which means that in 2025, we are likely to, if we want to make it all, if you really want to be a green environment and everything else, we will need 1,000 million tons, which is 1 billion tons of dry biomass. And what do we have available actually today in our country, based on our traditional agriculture, you know, all the rice stalk, cotton things? I mean, after feeding all our population, what do we have left over? Not more than 183 million tons. And so this is what I call the biomass gap. Our aspirations to become green versus what we can actually do. We are actually stopped by the availability of biomass. We can't scale anymore. We don't have any more land. What do? This is where I think seaweed biomass can come in. So our targets, if you took at 1 billion tons of dry biomass, you're talking about 10 billion tons of fresh seaweed. I mean, so you can see where we need to aim as a country. and what we need to do. And on that note, I'd really like to say that the effort that the government is doing, what we are doing. Can you go to the next slide, please? So you say, if you want to produce 1 billion tons of biomass, how much area on the sea do you need? Many people have asked us that. And at the productivities and the high productivities that say something like Kappa ficus has, you need an area of about 100,000 square kilometers in the ocean. And that is about and less than the size of Tamil Nadu in the ocean. And you can see the blue areas, the light blue areas around the Andaman Nicobar or on the left-hand side in the Arabian Sea. Area is not a problem. What we need is the ability to go there and do it. But it's not going to be easy, okay? I mean, it's not like you can just walk out and do deep ocean farming and everything, but that's the ambitious goal we need to get to. And if you look at what the challenges are, the next slide, please. And that's my last slide. What is the challenge in building massive offshore farms? First of all, and the foremost, obviously we can't do it manually. As a country, if we have to have the vision, this is the vision we need to have. Mechanized offshore farming. Then if you start farming on hundreds of square kilometer scale, obviously there'll be nutrient limitations. What do we need to do about those nutrient limitations? We can do upwelling, and there is lots of, as you know, the NIOT has already demonstrated, if you upwell deep ocean water, it is full of nutrients. So if you, the further out in the ocean you go, the deeper it gets. From 100 meters deep, you can start upwelling nutrients, and you can really create massive farms. When you're having farms the size of square kilometers, certainly our traditional methods can't be used. We need autonomous monitoring, drone monitoring, data collection. We really need to be doing farm. We need to have people living in offshore bases. Now, this is not science fiction. This technology already exists. I mean, we are one of the several companies trying to do this. But at the moment, we are lucky that because we got started about 10 years ago. I firmly believe that technology exists to overcome these challenges. And if we set ourselves this goal as a country, with a push from the government, there is nothing to stop us. So with that, I will end my presentation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Srikumar Surjanarayan. Now I will invite Mr. Oshin Saraf, the Group Chairman of Excel Industries Limited. He will be speaking about the industry expectations. Mr. Oshin Saraf, please.
Yeah, okay. I will try to be brief, and you as organizer would be happy to know that I don't have a presentation, so we don't have to go through that exercise.
Yeah, it's okay. please carry
I'll
on.
just be speaking verbatim. Okay. Okay. So let me thank. So at the outset, I would like to heartily greet my fellow delegates to this very important conference and compliment ICC, especially Dr. Rajiv Singh and Mr. Tapan Chattopadhyay, for annually organizing the Seaweed conference and inviting so many important stakeholders. So thank you very much. I would also like to thank and compliment the Government of India for recognizing the importance, somewhat belatedly, but anyway, it is there. And both Ministry of Fisheries and the CSMCRA have been very actively promoting and supporting the seaweed industry. And of course, the business and the industry, whether producers, processors, or consumers, have also been fairly active. However, the two things have been missing. One is a cohesive, integrated view and strategy for seaweed to connect all the stakeholders. And while India has great potential, but it has not been tapped. So these are the two things that we need to address. Now I'll straight away address some of the issues that Dr. Balaji would like to hear, that don't talk generalities, talk something specific. So I'll first talk that, and then I'll come to the why of it. Okay. 5 or 6 points that I have. One is that the natural farming is susceptible to natural forces. Means I am talking about the seaweed farming. If you try to do it through only nature, you are susceptible to so many natural forces that you will never get where you want to be. And the 97% being grown through cultivated one is an example, or is a demonstration or manifestation of that. So we need to de-risk the seaweed industry by doing it in a cultivated manner, which is what we need to do. We have been a player in this field, me and my group, for the last 3 years. So we are relatively new compared to Mr. Abhiram Seth or C6 We are relatively new, but we are trying to understand and do something about it. So we believe that the de-risking can be done by using land and land-based growing of seeds and growing of seaweeds, sea-based as appropriate, and using a hybrid of both the methods as it suits. So this is one. Secondly, I believe the availability of seeds in a reliable manner, of reliable quality, has been one of the issues. We are trying to address that, and I'm sure the whole industry is gearing up to doing that. And in fact, we heard speaker after speaker saying that the availability of seeds needs to be ensured. Then only we can progress. Uh, as far as the industry expectation is concerned, if I were an industry consuming the seaweed, naturally I would like that I have a supplier who is able to supply year round. I can't say that, okay, now monsoon has come, so I can't get it. No, reliable year round supply for the industry is very important. So we have to ensure, which is where the hybrid methods come into picture. Sometimes you do it in sea, sometimes you do it on land, and depends. Even cost may vary, but you have to average out the cost and you have to see what can be done. The next part is that this can't be done if it has to make an impact. It can't be done even on a very small scale. You have to have scale. You have to do a replicable models, scalable models. And let's say we have a fortunately very large coastline. We must utilize. We have several states with a long coastline. We must utilize that. Tamil Nadu and Gujarat have shown some way, and others have to follow. So, and even the concept of parks being established would be a way of ensuring that while the growers are there, the fishermen can be involved, the others are there processing, and whatever needs to be processed on the site itself can be done, drying can be done, energy generation can be done near the shore, and the high value products can be obtained. Even you can go away, so there's no problem. So parks can be established. Uh, I believe in other countries, the park concept is there. We have to learn from there and we have to also follow that. The other one is what I call the integrated approach. I mentioned that earlier, but we need to have integrated approach. Now the word integration can be interpreted in two ways. One is that all the stakeholders in the game have to come together in a synergistic manner so that we look at the different dimensions of the value chain in an appropriate manner and each one gets his or her share, appropriate share of the whole benefit. So this is one integration. The second integration, which also I believe is very important, is that one must learn to see value in each and every component of the seaweed that you grow. You can't say that I only want this or rest of it is garbage for me. No, you have to use all of that. And I think several speakers referred to, let's say, energy generation, for example. Now you need a lot of bulk. So that can be done near the shore. You use the biomass that is available, either put it through biogas or put it through gasification or in any other way, or you can even convert into briquettes and use them. But you have to use each and every kilo of that. Then only you will make sense. I am even dreaming that since so much of water comes along with the seaweed, why can't we recover that water so the water needs can be fulfilled? Energy needs can be fulfilled. So much of potash comes out. Why can't we recover that potash and use it? So there are n number of things that you can do, not only look at the high value products. So these are some of the, let's say, industry expectations. So I am on the both sides, both as an industry and also as a somebody, as a group. We are three companies who have been involved in this, and all three of us, we believe we are in enlightened management. We would like to look at this both both from economic proposition point of view as also the environmental point of view. So this is the concept. Now I'll quickly go through some of the other points that I had put down for sharing with all of you. There are different ways to describe the urgent need and context for looking at seaweeds. Some of these are the climate change, need for sustainable and inclusive economy, food and energy scarcity, security, etc., etc. And of course, post-corona, all of us are more aware of doing things very, very differently from what we have been doing. So post-corona situation, this can play a good part. I would just briefly elaborate the climate change dimension. As is well known, the main cause of climate change are the CO2 and the methane, which are the greenhouse gases. Two things need to be done. One is pull out all as rapidly as possible the accumulated CO2. And second, prevent and minimize the further addition of greenhouse gases. So both of these can be accomplished by the seaweed growing. In addition, the strained natural and other resources, for example, water we are short, food we can be short with a growing population, energy we are on fossil fuel basis, we need to shift to renewable energy. So these are the needs. I see seaweeds as a great, versatile, potentially abundant and sustainable, cost-effective resource, which is produced as well as consumed by millions. So it will benefit millions. So we must do that. Seaweeds mean photosynthesis, that is pulling out the CO2 both from the atmosphere and the oceans. If on one or if done on a wide and large scale, it has the capacity to reverse the climate change significantly in a span of 10 years. That is, by 2030, we can make a definite dent on the climate change. It won't strain the land or the freshwater resources. It will provide water, food, renewable energy, crop nutrition, valuable products. All this it will give. So that's the integrated approach to extracting value out of these seaweeds grown. It will provide additional income to the millions of fishermen. It will prevent belching of methane by cattle by incorporating seaweed in the just 2% in the cattle feed. So that is the prevention of the methane being let out into the atmosphere. So my last point is, so friends, let us begin immediately. What are we waiting for? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saraf, for your expectations points, and we will all hope that it will be met with this proper planning and strategy.
Right. Okay.
Now I will request Mr. Karn Nagaraju. He's the Deputy Director, Fisheries of Karnataka State, based in Karwar. So, Mr. Nagaraju, are you there?
I don't think he's there.
Yeah, he's not.
Let's go to the next speaker.
Okay. So, we are going to the next speaker. So, we'll invite Dr. Stephen Cran, the CEO of Seaweed Ireland and the current president of International Seaweed Associations. Now over to Dr. Stephen Cran. Dr. Cran is the.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Absolutely audible. Please start your presentation. I will just tell you the title of your presentation.
Yeah, that's fine. In the meantime, well, if you introduce the title.
Yes. The title is Gracilaria Cultivation by Company, Purple Turtle in Tamil Nadu, Sustainable Biomass Generation for Value-Added Products. Over to Dr. Stephen Cran, please.
And as you can see, I have my purple shirt on for the Purple Turtle Seed Company. First of all, I would like to thank ICC for the invitation, and especially Dr. Eswaran and Tapan Satapari for inviting me, and also for the Indian government and CSMCRI to recognize the importance of seaweed cultivation, and that this is becoming a focal point for India as a whole. I don't see my presentation on the screen. I don't know. Or do I have to share myself? Is that it?
So just few seconds. Let me share it.
Okay. But it's good to see. I just seen a couple of speakers. Sri was there as well. And yeah, there is a lot of potential and a lot happening, but like the previous speaker, Mr. Schoch from the Excel group said, let's start and do it. And this is a little bit of what I want to show as well. There we go. So, well, the introduction we already did, so we can go to the next slide straight away. So, India, the focus and the mandate is to increase seaweed production. And it has been identified now by the government as well as the states themselves, and also as by entrepreneurs that want to use seaweed ingredients as a focus area. Of course, we know it contributes to the coastal economy. It has societal and financial benefits, growing seaweeds. And there is now really a push by the government to start seaweed cultivation in all different states in India, coastal states, that is, of course. And we from ourselves get inquiries as well about different ingredients. There's a lot of companies in India that actually want to use seaweed ingredients, but they can't get them. There is not enough biomass. Next slide, please. So if we look at the current status, and I use here a term, phytonometrics, that was coined by Dr. Alan Critchley. He will actually be speaking tomorrow afternoon more on these details. But if we look at the global picture, there's about 31 million tons produced. And the whole industry is worth about $18 billion. It's a good industry because it's growing every year about 6 to 8%. And of all the seaweed that is produced, 96% is cultivated. And about 1 million tons is wild harvest, but we see a slowly steady decline in this. I think the figures for last year were about 800,000 tons. So it's going down. And the reason, of course, is obvious. Wild harvest isn't seen as sustainable, and people want to move to cultivated seaweed. If you look at that picture, and this is from a paper by Bushman in 2017, the different color codes show kind of how much is produced. And the first one that really springs out are, of course, China and Indonesia, with over 10 million tons of wet biomass cultivated. If you look at India, it's light green, and that's in the range of about 1,000 to 10,000 tons. So very small. If you look at the wild harvest, and I don't show this picture here, India isn't even colored. Next slide, please. So if you look at more detail at the species that are cultivated, and again, this is from the paper from Bushman, we see the Indian flag only at one species, and that is Capophycus, down on the right. I don't know if you can see. No, I'm not sharing the screen. So it's only the 6% of Capophycus that is making up the overall of the species cultivated, where India plays a very small role. Species that are most cultivated are kelp, Laminaria japonica, and this is mainly China, Korea, Japan, countries in Asia, and Yucuma. If we look at India as a whole, well, we have over 8,000 kilometers of coastline. If you look at the exclusive economic zone, it's 2.37 million square kilometers. So there's a lot of space to grow seaweed. Latest FAO data from 2018 show there was 5,302 wet tons produced, which is worth about half a million dollars. Sorry. And if we look at the top 10 aquatic algae producers from 2018, India does not feature in the top 10. So hence this conference comes at a very timely point to actually address this issue, and also the government has recognized now we want to get India in that top 10. Next slide, please.
Can you take your microphone close to your mouth?
Oh, okay. Is this better? Can you hear me? If not, then I unplug the system or the microphone.
It is better. It is better now.
It's clear, Stefan. It's clear.
Okay, sorry. I'll just keep it here. So if you look at India from an aquatic point of view, you see the different numbers here, 1, 2, 3, etc. one being the continental shelf in dark blue, two being the exclusive economic zone. Then in the red boxes, you see the different coral reefs that India has, and then 8 and 9 are proposed wind farms. So there's an enormous potential to grow seaweeds in this area. And Sri also already illustrated that in his presentation. There is enough area to grow seaweeds. If we look at those wind farms, that's another area, and that is something we do at the moment in the Netherlands as well, where we try to set up a multi-user platform. So it's not only a wind farm, we also try to grow seaweeds in those areas, you grow mussels, you grow oysters, so it's a multi-use area. And that is something, of course, that should be proposed here in India as well, that different players can play in that area, and that is not just only wind farm. Next slide, please. So seaweed, it offers a lot of solutions. First of all, if we start to grow or cultivate in large areas inshore or near shore, and it's been addressed in the previous talks as well, we have the CO2 uptake through seawater. And of course, that is if we look at climate change and all other issues that we have currently in the world, is very important, especially if you go large scale, it will really make a dent in the CO2 budget. Then another thing is the phosphate and nitrogen recycling, PNN. There's a lot of runoff from land from either agricultural or other anthropogenic sources, and seaweeds are very, very good in taking up these minerals. And in that way, by harvesting the seaweed and using it on land, either as a biostimulant or as animal feed or other applications, you can nicely recycle these nutrients. Then minerals like potassium are also very high in these seaweeds. K-sap, for example, is known for a high potassium content. Very useful for, again, agricultural purposes. So it's an excellent source of fertilizer and animal feed, but it can also be used for bioplastics, as we have seen in the previous presentations, or other materials or other bioactives, even up to the pharma level. So in this way, by recycling these nutrients, you start to basically initiate a circular economy. And with that, you of course have the social benefits, environmental benefits, especially for coastal rural areas. Next slide. So what have we been doing as the seaweed company Purple Turtle down in Tuticorin? Well, we are only in existence since the last conference where we actually met live in Chennai in January this year. But we managed to set up the company, started experimenting with rafts, with ropes, with tubular nets. And the experience so far is that the rafts are badly scalable and that is not economically viable. Rope cultivation kind of work, but you have issues with attachment, with storms and herbivory. And so far the tubular net seems to work out best, and we're still optimizing cultivation systems for this. Next slide. So we get the raw material in from cultivation. There is also some wild harvest still happening. Then it's processed by either washing and drying. And one of the things we are looking, especially on the cultivation side, is to establish seed banks with fishermen. Because one of the things we notice, if you harvest your crop from the same cultivar all the time over, it loses its vigor. So replenishing with seedlings is very important, and hence you need a seed bank so that you have all year round access to small plantlets to actually grow in your tubular nets. Next slide. Next slide, please. So one of the things we have done in Tuticorin as well is set up or establish a factory. And most importantly is to get this factory GMP plus certified. Oh, we're going too fast now. Can we go to the previous slide, please? The previous slide, please. Yes. So one of the things we try to do is to get the factory GMP plus certified. This is a requirement if you want to actually sell seaweed in the animal feed market. And this is quality control, pesticides, metals, all kind of hazard controls. Else you can't really sell properly in the market. In the factory, you get the further processing, the drying, the shredding, the milling, removing of impurities, sand, etc., etc. Next slide. So in the end, you depending on what methodology you use, you end up with different end products, being a coarse flake up to a fine powder. And that, of course, has different applications from biomaterials to cosmetics. Next slide. So what we do ourselves as the seaweed company, we have a range of different products where we use Crassularia, for example, and that is in the animal feed range. But we also use it in our biostimulant process, which is the top health plant range. We run trials as well with these products to look at KPIs, the key performance indicators on health, growth, infections, somatic cell count, for example, in dairy, etc., etc. Other things that we do is using this as a source for paper making, which you see in the left hand, and also in our own cosmetics range that you see here a nice picture of, and finally in health supplements. Next slide. However, if you go value add and want to move out of the biofertilizer kind of animal feed, which is okay market, but it's not where the value is. The value is really in health supplements, cosmetics, and pharma. Although the volumes will be much smaller, of course, but value is much higher. If you go up the pyramid, you will no doubt start to run into regulatory constraints. And these are, of course, the heavy metals, novel food regulations, problems with arsenic and iodine in seaweeds. So it's very important what type of seaweed you want to cultivate, that it is characterized properly, and that not halfway in the process you start to discover that arsenic, inorganic arsenic, is sky high and you can't use the species for certain applications. With cultivation, there is of course other constraints on that part, where in this case with Crassularia we use a local genetic stock. We are actually producing seed banks with local fishermen, and we are trying to scale it up. Not so much automate too much, because we are dependent on the fishermen and we want to create the jobs for the fishermen and the local communities. But these are all things that you have to start to take into account when scaling up large seaweed cultivation. Next slide. And just to illustrate, we have gone through these processes here in Ireland, in Europe as well, where we grow brown seaweeds. And just to get an aquaculture license to do something like this, these are all kind of regulations and rules and directives that we have to take into account before you get actually granted the seaweed license to grow seaweeds. And of course, I hope in India that this will be simplified and made easier. Next slide. And that is also my last slide. So the initiative from the government to stimulate the upscaling of seaweed aquaculture in India is a really great initiative. If we start with large-scale macroalgae cultivation, it falls within this regulatory and legal framework, which is controlled by the government and the state, so they can actually speed this up and simplify things and procedures, but it is in their hands. We also need identification of the most suitable areas, and this could be a program run over the next year to identify and make these sites available for entrepreneurs and people that want to cultivate. Again, this has to fall within this regulatory framework and the policies by the government, but this would be a very good step forward. The whole licensing procedure for getting a license to grow indigenous species should be simplified. For invasive species, that might be a different story. Then also look at the internal market in India. There is a huge market available for sales of value-added products, but also open up the export market for value-added products. Now, it's great to see that grants and subsidies are becoming online with this new program that is launched by the government, which also, I think, includes easy access to loans for fishermen or farmers that want to grow seaweeds. So all these together, if we implement this now, they are the keys to success to get India in that top 10 of aquatic algae producers. So from here on, it's only upwards and onwards. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Kran. I mean, with a lot of busy schedule, you have made some time for us. Thank you for your presentation. We'll now invite Dr. Ira Levine. Dr. Ira Levine is a professor, natural and applied sciences, Fulbright scholar, University of Maine, USA. Dr. Levine is a very well-traveled scientist in Indian coast and in India. So today his topic is renaissance of seaweed farming in North America and how the Algae Foundation is training new algae farmers, the training module to transfer to India.
Thank you very much. If you could upload my presentation, it'd be appreciated.
Yes, yes.
And while we wait for that, I'd certainly like to thank the leadership of ICC for organizing this this meeting. One of my first virtual meetings. But I'd also like to thank the government of India and its dedication to the Fulbright program. Through the Fulbright program, I had the extreme fortunate pleasure to spend almost a year in India over my 2 Fulbrights with Dr. Sahu, who will be speaking tomorrow. And so I have great affection for the country of India and really appreciate the invitation to continue to serve her. So we'll just wait for the presentation.
Suman, can you slides here?
Excellent. Thank you very much. Again, I'm here not as a professor from the University of Southern Maine, but as the president of the Algae Foundation. The foundation has been in existence about 7 years, and we have been training both microalgae and macroalgae farmers for the past 5 years. And I'd like to go over the program starting from K-12 for kindergarten through graduating high school, technical college, community colleges, universities, extension education programs for people who are already in aquaculture in one form or another. Could we go to the next slide, please? Great. This is a sort of a flow chart representing what the Algae Foundation has accomplished. About 5-6 years ago, I approached the Department of Energy to say, you've put $500 million into algae research, and with all these new algae farms being proposed and established, where are the trained algae farmers going to come from? And so without setting up an RFP, they directly funded the Algae Foundation through the National Renewable Energy Lab. And we formed what's called ATEC, the Algae Technology Educational Consortium. And everything below the ATEC sign are the 5 major thrusts of the Algae Foundation. And we don't create any jobs. And so that this slide used to be an error because all the arrows would point to the jobs. And someone in a meeting said, are you really creating jobs? And quite frankly, the answer is no. What we create are the trained men and women to be able to work those jobs. But also, surprisingly enough, not only are they employees, but many of our graduates start their own businesses. So that's that really has an additive effect because our first graduates from our college programs graduated in 2018, and they're starting to hire some of our graduates from our 2019 and 2020 classes. So the entrepreneurial aspect of our training programs is significant. So I'll quickly go over the middle two, the K-12 and the what we call the MOOCs, the massive open online courses. Next slide, please. So in the United States, we don't have a great understanding of what algae and seaweeds are all about. People see the red tides and the green lakes in the summertime, and algae for many of our citizens, not such a good profile. So the Algae Academy is our K through grade 12 or through high school program to deliver STEM kits. And you see all of this material that we send free of charge to schools across the United States. And we've been tremendously successful. This past year, we served 36,000 students. Next slide, please. And so this is just a graph of our growth. We're in 46 states, and hopefully this year we'll get those last 4. And on the left-hand side, you see a map of the United States, and in green are the states where we have sent our kits to. So we have 4 more states to go. But you can see the tremendous growth. We're doubling just about every year. And our major goal, the next goal, is to reach 100,000 students either this academic year or next. And then we have sort of a loose commitment from one of America's largest families to fund these kits for every school in the United States. So that's our goal. But we've also reached out, and we're in 4 different countries, Iceland, Canada, Mexico, and Australia. And so the Algae Academy is looking to expand internationally its curriculum and forming the North Atlantic consortium of universities. We're next looking at Norway, Sweden, Finland, and countries around the North Atlantic. Next slide, please. Our next opportunity to reach people is through MOOCs. MOOCs stand for Massive Open Online Course. These are free college courses. It started about 15 years ago through the universities of Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and Stanford. And there's a company called Coursera, and they organize all the MOOCs that are produced by their member schools. We've published our first MOOC, the Introduction to Algae MOOC, in February, about 2.5 years ago. And we've had 13,000 students take the course. And you can see some of the feedback. I mean, we get tremendous amount of demographic information. And if you notice, the second largest country or source of students is India. And we find that India is our largest international partner for all of the Algae Foundation curriculum. So we're tremendously pleased to be able to service India, and hope through meetings like this that we can expand that effort. But the real relevance of this course is that almost 20% of the people, of those 13,000 people who took the course, got a raise or a promotion. We didn't realize that companies are going to use these massive open line courses as professional development tools for existing employees. And in fact, Cyanotech, the United States' largest microalgae farming concern, mandates that all of their employees take these courses. Next slide, please. Ooh, I apologize for the really tiny words. On the screen, they come out much bigger. But we've published about 3 months ago our second MOOC, Introduction to Microalgae Biotechnology. And that is through the University of California at San Diego's online university. My partner, Stephen Mayfield, who co-produced it, is the head of their California Advanced Biotechnology Institute at UCSD, and we published it through there. Interestingly enough, for this group, our third MOOC, Introduction to Seaweed Biotechnology, will be published in about a year from now. We have approximately a dozen lectures already filmed. In fact, Stephen Cron, Dr. Cron, who just spoke, gave 2 fascinating lectures. So we really look forward to publishing that next next MOOC. Next slide, please. So the question is, what are we trying to accomplish? And again, it's about the power of algae. All of the speakers today have talked about more seaweed farming, more economic development, more in production of algal biomass to service the Indian industrial needs, agricultural needs. And so the question is, how do we do that? Next slide, please. Education. And so some of these pictures you might recognize in the upper left-hand corner. That's from Dr. Sahu and his Chilika story of bringing gracilaria farming to the Chilka Lake that its integrity was broken during a typhoon and had a saltwater intrusion, and a magnificent story. This can be produced or reproduced throughout the country. On the lower section, as I said earlier, the Algae Foundation is size agnostic. So we are seaweed trainers and we are microalgae trainers. Also, India has some of the largest industrial concerns involved with microalgae farming, including Reliance and Pari Nutraceuticals. Next slide, please. So what are we using for our seaweed training? And so we use a variety of existing educational opportunities. And the beauty of being the Algae Foundation, everyone says yes to us. If we ask for access to lectures, if we ask for access to textbooks, in fact, the amazing thing about our ability to reach out to different groups, Academic Press and Elsevier publishers, I recently published 2 different textbooks, and they've given us the chapters for Introduction to Microalgae, Introduction to Seaweeds, of which was co-authored by Dr. Sahu, who will be speaking tomorrow. And they've given us those chapters for free. So anyone who takes any of our college courses get a free textbook. And so we're able to share those chapters without paying any licenses and without paying any fees to the publishers. So the ability of the Algae Foundation to grab grab educational assets is the key to our success. Next slide, please. And so if you want to find us or try to understand what we're doing, we have 2 websites, the Algae Foundation and the Algae Foundation atech.org. But if you want to look at our extension effort, it's called ACES, ACES. That's the Algae Cultivation Extension Short Courses. And the easiest way to find them is just Google ATEC ACES Algae. Next slide, please. And this just gives you a list again of how many people are taking our courses. These are published within this year. And as you can see, the Seaweed course, or part 1 of ACES, was published first. And India, although it's not a large number, but India, again, is the second largest participant, as is in part 2, the microalgae. India is represents the second largest group in taking the course. Next one, please. And at the bottom of that slide, I failed to just mention that not only are we global, but we've reached students from 45 different countries and almost every continent of the globe. And so we're very pleased that everything that the Algae Foundation produces, we give away for free. Everything is free. Our curriculum is free. Our lectures are free. Our laboratories are free. Our training guides are free. And so probably sending our kits around the globe, we'll probably have to figure that one out. That's a challenge. Shipping is one of our biggest costs. So I'm not quite sure I'm going to extend shipping our educational kits to India. Would be free, but we could certainly assemble them in India and distribute it that way. So let's go over our specific seaweed training courses. So here we have ACES Part 1, macroalgae. Next slide, please. So this is roughly what the curriculum is based upon. So we have, which seaweeds to grow, how to grow them, we heard earlier that we need seed banks. There's been talk about to scale up, we have to go offshore. In the United States, the Department of Energy spent $25 million. It's in, I think, the 4th year of that ARPA-E program called Mariner to develop technology, remote sensing, autonomous vehicles, seed banks, enhanced cultivars for offshore kelp farming, and also commercial reds in the Gulf of Mexico. And so all of these topics for harvesting, processing, husbandry, farm site, lease site acquisition are all a part of this course. Next slide, please. And the second one that was published about 10 months ago is the microalgae one. And most of the curriculum from this was taken from our partner school, Santa Fe. And Santa Fe has developed a whole degree of algae cultivation, of microalgae. And much of our curriculum has been sort of taken from their different courses. We've developed 6 individual courses: Algal Culture 1, Algal Culture 2, Advanced Algal Culture 3, Processing, Farming. We're developing a biology of an intro biology of algae course. We'll be doing, and we're also developing heterotrophic algae cultivation, fermentation. Next slide, please. And just in the last 3 or 4 slides, we'll talk about what's happening in the state of Maine. This is a rather old slide because you can see the difference. There I am with a red beard, and I'm talking to you with a white beard. So that sort of dates how old this slide is. In the 1990s, we brought Japanese nori farming technologies to the state of Maine, and also the maritime provinces of Canada, and in fact remains the largest seaweed farm in the history of the United States. And so we're very proud of that effort. So seaweed is facing a new renaissance in the state of Maine and New England area, along with Alaska and the northwest coast of the United States. Next slide, please. And so there, you'll see this list of what is cultivated in in this area of the world in north temperate waters. A very different list, but you will notice that Gracilaria, a ubiquitous species, genera that's found around the world, is farmed here, and so we have a reasonable diversity of cultivars in which the state is farming. Next one, please. And so this is nothing new. I won't spend any time on it. Obviously, everybody here knows this list, so we'll go right to the next one. And in the state of Maine, it's funny, when we started seaweed farming in 1990, seaweed was not in the definition of aquaculture. And so we were allowed sort of to do anything we wanted because nobody had jurisdiction over algae. That was sort of odd until the Army Corps of Engineers, if you remember Dr. Cron's presentation, he had that list of a myriad of licenses and permits he had to get to be able to farm in the waters of Ireland. We just started with an experimental lease site similar to what we have here. Ours was 10 acres. This is much, much smaller. But we just started farming until I got a letter from the Attorney General of the state of Maine telling them or telling me that I owed $10 million because my experimental farm was off the lease site. And that was before there were GPSs. And so we were siting our farm by just trying to eyeball the land coordinates. And so that was quite interesting that I owed $10 million for a violation of water. Nowadays, they have passed the legislation that seaweed is absolutely involved in aquaculture and has to abide by aquaculture lease site protocols. And it's interesting, you've all heard organic certification. There was no such thing as seaweed organic certification in the 1990s. In fact, I approached OCIA to develop them and they had no expertise. So not only was our farm the first organic produced and processed seaweeds in the world, I wrote the rules and regulations that are still in effect. So some things are easier when you're the first to do something, and some things are harder. So now we have a much more defined process. We have a 3-stage process to get lease sites. I will say to Stephen, he should move from Ireland to Maine, because the first 2 sets of lease sites are streamlined and an area permit is needed. So here is the experimental or limited person. Again, you could probably, in terms of maximum production, is about 1.25 metric tons of algae per year. Next slide, please. The next side is an experimental lease. You're allowed to get that very easily for 3 years. It's 4 acres in size, and that way you can develop your different arrays of aquaculture engineering and see what works best on your site. And again, this lease site can produce up to 60 metric tons of kelp. Next slide, please. And the last is up to 100 acres. When we farmed it, yes, it's 100 acres is the maximum size. But what we found is we had 3 separate lease sites, and our farm was 123 acres. It wasn't $100 a year back then, but it is now $100 a year in terms of lease rental fee. Again, this is a more involved process. Back in the day, the biggest, and I don't think you have the same challenge in India, but the biggest challenge to successful seaweed farming in the United States is water use conflicts. We have tremendous amount of inshore water. We have tremendous amount of inshore nutrients, and we have some really talented people that can be excellent seaweed farmers. The problem is you have to compete with fishermen, scallop draggers, urchin draggers, lobstermen, pleasure boaters, sailboaters. Then you have to deal with right whales, and they're an endangered species, and you have to deal with shipping channels. And all of those things really present a massive challenge to getting a lease to farm algae, because algae is a horizontal crop versus mussels or oysters, which is a vertical crop. And so what happened in my farm is the urchin draggers and scallop fishermen wanted the scallops and the urchins underneath our farm. And so they would, at night, vandalize our farm, cut our ropes, to the point where we armed our boats. And it was literally a war between the aquaculturist and the commercial fishermen. And unfortunately, after 10 years, we lost the war and we had to close the farm because we could not sustain the vandalism from the water use conflicts. So as a result of that, that realization that water use conflicts are everywhere, whether it's California, Oregon, Washington, probably minimal in the state of Alaska, which will probably lead the way for seaweed farming in the United States. But in New England, Connecticut, New Hampshire, and the state of Maine, inshore water use conflicts won't disappear. And so with the Mariner program from ARPA-E of the Department of Energy, they're looking, as was presented here earlier today, offshore, deep water seaweed farming. And if you're going to reach the amount of biomass, you're talking about gigatons, you're talking about biofuels and soil amendments and elicitors, you need to be offshore. And so you're right. There's a tremendous amount of technology that will need to be developed and disseminated across the globe to make that a reality. But the Algae Foundation stands ready to provide the educational resources to train first in terms of K through 12, our job is to bring up algae to the general student population and try to see if we can get a few of them to think about algae as a career. Our goal is, of all the students in junior and senior year in high school, we would like to get between 2 and 5% of them to either go to college to study algae or go right into the workforce to be algae farmers. And so that's our goal in terms of why we're doing K through 12 and our ability to train with college courses and college degrees or with extension courses for people who already are working on the water. Next slide, please. And just to thank the people who have funded us, the Department of Energy and the National Renewable Energy Lab, also the Department of Agriculture, the United States Department of Agriculture has also funded us. And some of the slides in terms of the main efforts come from the main Sea Grant program. Last slide, please. And so while we wait for the last slide, again, please contact me. I'm sure the ICC is distributing email addresses. And so in terms of expanding the Algae Foundation's seaweed and or micro algae curriculum for India, we stand ready to serve her. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. From Europe to now we are coming to Africa. We'll invite Dr. Flower Masua from the Institute of Marine Science, University of Dar es Salaam, Zanzibar, Tanzania. And she will talk about challenges of the seaweed industry in Tanzania and the role of the global seaweed star projects. Dr. Masua, are you there?
I don't see her online, Stefan.
She has sent the presentation, so I think Dr. Flower. Suman, you have her presentation, no?
For whom, Tapunda?
Dr. Flower Maswa?
No, not for him.
Oh, problem somewhere. Anyway, then now Dr. Utpal Kumar sir is there. Dr. Utpal Kumar sir.
Tapunda, your voice is breaking.
Dr. Utpal Kumar sir from Andaman and Nicobar. Dr. Utpal Kumar sir, are you available?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, he is not available. So I think at this moment we are closing the today's session. We are requesting all of you.
Sir, Mr. Sir is there.
What is there?
Dr. Sir is there.
Yeah.
We will join in a second.
Okay. Okay. So we have the last talk. Dr. Utpal Kumar sir, he is the Commissioner of Fisheries, Andaman and Nicobar Islands. He will present or speak about the prospect of the seaweed in Andaman and Nicobar Islands and what they have done so far and what is their vision in coming 5 years. Is he joined?
Sir, actually, he's joining. Hello, hello, please, sir, please.
Doctor sir.
Sir, there is some issues with Dr. Sir's laptop. He is joining within a minute, he said.
Okay. So let us wait for him because this is on one area where he is directly involved with the cultivation of seaweed in Andaman and Nicobar, and he is in charge of that. Shima, is it through?
He is trying, sir. Sir, I will request if there is any question, if anyone want to ask something, because he is trying to join us. There is some issue with his laptop, so he is joining within a minute, he said.
That I understand because we are already at 27.
Kindly, sir, wait for a moment.
Yeah.
There are some questions in Q&A. So probably you can go through that.
I can't see the question. Can you see the questions?
So it is better someone from the panelists can check and whether they're meaningful or not.
Dr. Sahu, you the questions because there are some questions which I can't see from my side. If you can see, then you can put this across.
Tapan, I've just had a look at all the questions, but it's nothing is a technical question. Some are comments, okay, but nothing is particularly a technical question. That, okay, there's some GI mapping, an excellent suggestion. There's one question on Dr. Vaibhav Mantri on what the government official procedure to start cultivation, but that's probably better not addressed to Dr. Vaibhav. Then that's it. Too many comments or questions. I think.
Can I have a technical question for you, Sri?
Yeah, go ahead.
On the copperfighters, if you grow in tubular nets, you harvest the nets again and again. Are you not afraid to lose vigor? And that you
no. So what happens there? Yeah, I get your question, Stefan. So the machinery we have developed is able to remove the kappa ficus from within the net also. Every time.
So you put new seedlings in all the time.
Yeah. So what happens is that when a tube net, the kappa ficus, which is rapidly growing, we put fresh kappa ficus into the tube net, then it grows outside of the tube net. So obviously the portion that is growing outside of the tube net is the latest and the fastest and the youngest. So
no, I understand that, but I thought you were taking only the outside and
no.
But you take all the kappa ficus out.
Yes, that's right. So what we do is we pass it through a set of rollers. It just simply breaks the kappa inside the tube net, and then it, with a light shake, the complete tube net is regenerated, and then you can reseed it back.
We can't do that with the gracilaria. That won't break.
Why not?
No, it's too thin, too wiry.
Oh, it doesn't break and doesn't crunch.
No. So we really have to take it out.
Oh yeah. I've seen yeah. There could be other ways of doing that. So we
still try to optimize, of course, ourselves, but then again, we only started in May. We're only a couple of months at it. So
sure. I mean, we can talk about it if there are some ideas. Maybe we can work together on that. I mean, there's no problem, Stefan.
Yeah, and I would have loved to be there in Tutti.
I mean,
but this bloody COVID, it stops everything.
Yeah. Okay. We should talk
for the answer. Sri.
Yeah. All right. So Tapan, maybe we could just end the meeting then. And
I'm doing that. So thank you very much. We are closing the day's program here, and I'm requesting all of you to join us tomorrow at 2:00 India Standard Time, and we can be a part of the programs tomorrow. And with this note, I am closing the session today, and we'll once again resume at sharp at 2:00. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Thank you. Bye bye.